Hello, everyone. Welcome to our discussion on theories of organic evolution. So, in this particular session, we are going to discuss the several theories which was put forward by different or many different scientists to explain how evolution occurs. So, in the previous sessions, we discussed about how life originated on Earth, and now we are going to see how it progressed in the sense how life evolved and diversified. And to explain that, several theories have been put forth by or have been proposed by many scientists, of which many were found to be not valid or they had only historical significance, etc. And whenever we talk about the theories of evolution, the first name that strikes is Charles Darwin, and that is because Charles Darwin have changed the popular attitude towards biology by or towards evolution by publishing his theories on the origin of species, which is popularly known as the theory of evolution. But the idea of organic evolution was accepted by the scientific community much before Darwin. So, scientists in Europe, from their observations on diverse organisms, found that the common features in organisms pointing to a common ancestor, which was proposed even before Darwin, or even before Darwin proposed the theory of the natural selection or theory of evolution. So they attempted to give a logical explanation to this unity or this common ancestry. So various theories have been put forward to explain the mechanism of evolution. All these theories are often studied under two heads. They are called as pre-Darwinian theories and post-Darwinian theories, of which Lamarckism and Weismannism or the germplasm theory are the two pre-Darwinian theories which we are going to discuss. And the after that, we'll be discussing about the theory of natural selection by Darwin and the post-Darwinian theories, which we'll be discussing as the mutation theory. And after mutation theory, as there is the developments of the other branches in biology like genetics, etc., there were revisions of the existing theories of evolution, like they were revised by other scientists, and they were named as Neo-Lamarckism as well as Neo-Darwinism, etc. And apart from that, there were modification to the existing theory of natural selection, where the idea of genetics, the idea of Mendel was incorporated, and the newer ideas from different fields were also incorporated, and that was discussed or that will be discussed under the head. So they are just modification of the theory of natural selection, which will be discussed as modern synthetic theory, etc. So this is or this particular thing gives an outline of what we are going to discuss in this particular session. So we'll be discussing the major theories of evolution here, organic evolution, of which pre-Darwinism we'll discuss Lamarckism and the germplasm theory, followed by the theory of natural selection by Darwin and Wallace, and the post-Darwinism, which is the mutation theory. So these are the ones who contributed to the theories of organic evolution. Charles Darwin and Russell and Wallace contributed to the theory of natural selection. Then Lamarck contributed to Lamarckism, and August Weismann contributed to the germplasm theory. Or they are the ones who proposed these particular theories, and mutation theory by Hugo De Vries. So directly moving on to the first theory in pre-Darwinism, which is Lamarckism. So Lamarckism is usually discussed under two heads, or the two main principles of Lamarckism: the use and disuse theory and the inheritance of acquired characters. So coming to Lamarckism, which was proposed by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who was a French biologist. So he is considered to be the founder of the first complete modern theory of evolution. Lamarck was born in 1744 in a very poor family, and he was first educated to be against his will to be a priest. But because he was not interested, he discontinued the course and joined the French army. Um, and after the expiry of his father, he returned from the military service and studied medicine in Paris. He took up a job of organizing botanical garden and the Royal Palace Museum in Paris. And in around the beginning of the 19th century, that is in 1793, he became the professor of invertebrate zoology and was considered an authority in the field. So this was a short biography of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. So his contribution to the theory of organic evolution is that he discarded the contribution of fixed species. Till then, uh, the belief was that the organisms do not change. That means it is having the roots in the special creation theory, where it is hypothesized that God created everything in this particular state and they do not change. So what you see now is existed in the or existed in the past without any change. That is what is called as special creation theory, and he discarded this concept, and this particular concept is called as fixed species. Fixed species means the organisms are not evolving in the sense they are not changing. Changes does not happen in animals because they were created by a superpower, and they are existing from time immemorial in that particular form till till date. And that was questioned by Lamarck, and he discarded this particular concept of fixed species, and he proposed that organisms do change or organisms evolve. He proposed that living things change as time progresses, and it give rise to new species. So complex organisms, or he considered that complex organisms evolved from simple ones, and he was first to postulate the theory of the organic evolution in 1809, popularly known as Lamarckism. So Lamarckism can be summarized under four heads. So he considered that life always tend to increase in size as living organisms become more and more complex. That means life always tend to increase the size of living organisms and their component parts. New organs develop in order to meet the need felt by the organism. So there are two things to be pointed out here. That means when a new structure or a change to happen, what Lamarck suggested is that first a need should be there. That means environment to trigger some environment should have a triggering factor. For example, a famine, so that they will be shifting there, or they will be in search of some other type of food. So such environmental trigger should be there, and that is what is called as need. And that need should be felt by the organism. That means the organism by its own, or it should have an internal urge that it needs that particular organ to survive. So that is what Lamarck proposed. That means there should be a need which is triggered by the environment, and the second one is an internal urge that should come from the animal. That means the animal should have an urge, or the animal should have a wish that that particular organ or that particular change should happen in its body. So another thing that was proposed by Lamarck was that in Lamarckism, the other major point is that use of a particular organ leads to its better development, and disuse will result in reduction or degeneration of that particular organ. New characters are acquired in lifetime of an organism is preserved and transmitted to its offspring, which is called as the inheritance of acquired character. That means any new character that is acquired in the lifetime, that is called as acquired character. That is not inborn. That is which we do not get from our parents. That means if you have a broken leg, a broken arm, that is something which is being acquired, that is being acquired in the lifetime. And he says that such changes, whatever the change mean, or not only broken legs or broken hands, whatever the change that is being uh, acquired in the lifetime will be transmitted to its offspring. That is what is called as inheritance of acquired character. So these are the four important postulates of Lamarckism. uh, the we'll be discussing most importantly the two important postulates, which is the use and disuse theory and the inheritance of acquired characters. So here we talked about the four important postulates, and now we are moving on to directly on to the first one, which is the use and disuse theory. Uh, so, uh, Use and disuse theory, it states that when an organ is put to regular and constant use by an organism, it will be well developed, whereas disuse will result in gradual degeneration or complete disappearance of an organ. So that is what is suggested by Lamarck. That means if an organism uses a particular organ constantly and regularly, what happens is it becomes well developed. And when an organism does not use a particular organ because that is not needed or that is not necessary for its survival, that particular organ, uh, because it is not being used, there will be a gradual degeneration, and at the end, there will be a complete disappearance of that particular organ. And next is variations, which is nothing but changes. Variation means changes. So changes appear among individuals. It is because of this use and disuse, because a particular organ or individual organism it uses a particular organ, that result in a change because it is using that particular organ, and uh, according to Lamarck, that particular organ will be developed. As a result, he will be different from his ancestor, and he believed that for variation to happen or for variation to occur in a particular organ, that means he said that when an organism uses a particular organ, it will be developed or it becomes well developed. And for that to happen, that means for that organ to be developed, what should happen in the first place is that he believed that a conscious effort is required from the part of the animal with changing environment for variation to occur. That is what we discussed in the earlier session, that two things are required for variation to occur. One is need, and the second, that is a cue from the environment, and the second one is an internal urge. So need is contributed by the environment, and internal urge should be contributed by the organism itself. That means he believed that that is what is discussed here. That is, he believed that a conscious effort is required from the part of the animal. That means the animal should have an internal urge or a wish that uh, that part should change because the environment is changing and it should survive. So a conscious effort should be there, and only with that conscious effort from the part of the animal, that particular change, or whether it can be enlargement of that organ, or it can be degeneration of that organ. Both are changes. That means if an organ is developed, it is a change from its ancestor. If an organ disappears, that is also change. Both are variations, and that is resulting in the generation of a new species, and that is what is called as evolution. So whatever it be, whether the development of an organism, or development of an organ, or degeneration of an organ, for both to happen, two things should come to place. Both can be categorized under one head, which is called as variation. So, for variation to occur, what should happen is that a particular organ to develop or that organ to degenerate, there should be a need, which is an environmental cue or the changing environment, you can say it. And there also should be a conscious effort, which is called as an internal urge from the animal. And such variations, which are resulting from conscious effort by the organism, will be passed on to the next generation during sexual reproduction. That means such changes will be inherited to the offspring. So, in successive generations, such repeated efforts will lead to the formation of new species. So, he also believed that evolution is not a process which is happening all on a sudden. That means a new organ, an organism is having an internal urge to develop a new organ. Tomorrow, a new organ develops. No, so that is not being that is not the one which was proposed by Lamarck. He also believed that, or he was a believer that evolution is a gradual process. It does not occur all on a sudden. So it is a gradual process, and the change to be seen in a particular in an organism, it takes many generations. Only in successive generation and repeated effort by each organism in the successive generation will lead to the formation of the new species. So the main example of this use and disuse theory, as you can see in the diagrams, it is the most popular example of the neck and the forelimbs of giraffe. If you observe the giraffe carefully, you can see that the forelimb is longer than the hind limb. Usually, it should be of equal length, but it is longer than that of the hind limb, and also the neck is very long. So these two are the examples which is taken to discuss the use and disuse theory, and this is an example where use leads to the development of an organ. So here, what Lamarck says that the ancestors of the present-day giraffes were very small, and they resembled our goats or sheeps, which were having almost equal forelimbs and hind limbs, and also a short neck. So what happened was that the first thing, the need should happen. The need was an environmental change. So they were like our you can consider like our deers or like our goat, etc. They were grazing in the grasslands, or they were browsers which were feeding on grasses. But what happened is, because of an environmental change, all the grasses disappeared. And as a result of that disappearance of those grasses, so what happened is that the particular giraffes which were shorter ones, they had to search of food which were on trees. So they have to either jump and reach the trees, or they have to stretch their neck, etc. So Lamarck says that the repeated stretching, so generation after generation, what happens is, because there is no grass, all the organisms which were created, or the generations which were formed, they started to stretch their neck. So repeated stretching, generations after generation, and repeated internal urge that they do not have grass on the ground. They have to feed only on the foliage which is present in the trees, led to the development of the neck. So after many generations, the length of the neck slowly increased and reached the present day height. So and also the same happened with the forelimb, because they were trying to reach uh, the high branches. They also stretched their forelimbs. They stretched their forelimbs and they stretched their necks. As a result, both of these organs they developed, and the present day giraffes were formed, and that is an famous example of Lamarckism. So the examples of use and disuse theory are the first place which we discussed here, which is the uh, neck and forelimb of giraffe. So due to constant use, the ancestral this is due to the elongation of the long neck, or the presence of the long neck and the long forelimb is due to constant use. So the ancestral giraffes were short-necked with a forelimb and hind limb of uniform length, and these were browsing ancestors, were forced to live in the conditions where grass and herbage was very scarce, and they were forced to browse on foliage of trees and the conscious effort of stretching. So every generation, so you can see here, so this was the first one. When grasses vanished, what happened is they started to feed on the high foliage. So the you can see the length of the neck, it started to increase generation after generation. It's the length of the neck, it started to increase, and you can see that in the present day it has reached this particular height. So this is a gradual process. So after generation, the internal urge as well as the environmental need resulted in this particular uh, uh, the long neck and the long forelimb of giraffes. So the second example is of wading birds. So to keep their body above water, the birds they stretch their legs. So all the birds were terrestrial, and when they started to feed or started to find their food in water, example in ponds, etc., their body started to become or come into contact with water, and that resulted in impaired their movement because the feathers were wet, etc., becomes wet, etc. So what happened? What there was an internal urge. So the need was they didn't have much food on land, so started to invade in ponds, etc., to catch insects, fishes, etc. So what happened is to prevent their body or avoid their body from touching water, there was an internal urge in the terrestrial birds, and that internal urge resulted in stretching of the legs, and this one resulted. Such legs resulted. So that is another example of what is called as the use theory. The another example of biceps is the use theory is the biceps muscles of blacksmiths. So the bicep muscles are well developed because they are constantly used. Because before the machineries came, the blacksmiths they used their biceps to beat iron or to beat hot iron. As a result of constant use of their muscles, their bicep muscles became well developed. So that is another example. So coming to another example of use theory, that is of webbed feet. So these also evolved from terrestrial birds. In search of food, they moved to water bodies and they start to float and move in water. They had to spread their legs because with the normal legs of birds, they could not swim. So they started to stretch their feet, and this stretching, in this attempts, the skin at the base of the toes expanded and resulted in the formation of webs. So this is an explanation which was given by Lamarck for the appearance of webbed feet in birds, in water birds. Next is the next three examples are the examples which is related to disuse theory. In disuse theory, he states that the snakes and lizard, the snakes were lizard and like, and they had pair limbs, and it was a hindrance because they had a crawling habit, and that was a hindrance. As a result, they did not use their limbs, and gradually they disappeared because they are not using it. As a result, they disappeared. Another example is of cave animals, as you see here. This is a cave fish. It's normal this fish is also seen in normal habitat, in that they have the eyes. But cave animals do not use their eyes, and in complete darkness, because of the disuse of the eye, it degenerates and loss of sight occurs. So, this is another example stated by Lamarck for disuse theory. And another last example is regarding the vestigial organs. So the vestigial organs is a result of continuous disuse, like the coccyx, the ear muscles in humans, etc. Because we do not have a tail and we do not use it, that degenerated into a coccyx, which is a vestigial organ. The same with ear muscles. We do not, because we are having a well-developed pinna, we do not use the ear muscles for changing the direction of the ear, etc. Because our ears, the pinna is fixed. As a result, the ear muscles also become vestigial, and that becomes non-functional. So these are the examples which was stated by Lamarck to explain the theory of use and disuse theory. So the next theory is the inheritance of acquired characters, which we'll discuss in the next session. Thanks for hearing.